May the Simpsons be with you.
And also with you.
Let us play. Hey guys, it's Max, your friendly neighborhood Simpsons kin. My other projects are taking me a bit longer than I had anticipated, namely my upcoming video on Planescape Torment, so I figured I would do an intermediary video to keep you guys satiated. Now, you guys might be asking, why this game? Why I Am Jesus Christ? Well, first of all, the people behind the game were kind enough to send me a preview code of the game's prologue before its official release on December 1st. Thank you very much for that. I didn't even ask them for one. I guess maybe they sent me one because I talk about religious mythology on my channel a lot and how it often shows up in video games, and maybe they thought I would like a code for that reason. Second of all, and this might surprise you, I think the idea of a video game centered on the life of Jesus Christ has potential. Before I expand on that second point, I got to address two groups of people. The Christians who might be watching, and the people that want me to Sodom and Gomorrah this game into oblivion. Look, I grew up a Christian. I went to Christian school for almost a decade. I'm agnostic now, bordering on atheist, but don't think that means that I'm just going to use this game as a conduit or excuse to insult the Christian community or the faith. I mean, as an agnostic atheist, I have no problem inherently with making fun of religion, but everybody else on the internet has been doing that with this game since it was announced 3 years ago, and I figured I would do something different. Something constructive. As an agnostic atheist, I actually want this game to succeed, because ultimately, whether we like it or not, Jesus was the defining figure of the last 2 millennia, with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions like Buddha. For that reason, I think the story of Jesus is something we should be knowledgeable about, even if we aren't inclined to believe in Christian metaphysics. And using the video game medium could bring the story of Jesus to a whole new generation of people who might not otherwise be inclined to read the Bible, you know? So, unlike what most other people are going to do, which is use the game to make fun of Christians, I'm just going to review the game itself, or the prologue, rather. With all that said, the question is whether or not this game is on the right track. Is it doing justice to the source material? The answer to that question is virtually the same as it is for all other forms of Christian media. If you're a Christian, I think you're going to be able to overlook all of the game's flaws and celebrate it, and more power to you. But to everybody else who isn't a Christian, this game is abysmal. I'm not even talking about the abundance of technical bugs and glitches, which of course are to be expected for any early access game. I mean the graphics, the art direction, the sound design, and worst of all, the gameplay. It's like all these different elements were swallowed by the big whale, along with Jonah, digested in stomach acid, and then regurgitated 3 days later onto the Ninevean shore. There's absolutely nothing here that will appeal to someone that isn't already a convert. Now before any of you say, well, it's early access, these problems can be ironed out before it's released. No, they can't if they're aiming to release the game in Q2 2023, which is what their Steam page says. There is no way they can bring this game up to baseline industry standards in the next 6 months. If they do release in the second quarter of 2023, the best case scenario I can imagine is that the game gets rid of the major bugs, smooths out some of the ugly looking environments, and fine-tunes some of the controls. But even if they delayed the game, it will still fail, because the core game design philosophy is completely misguided. Most of the game is just walking from one place to the other over barren and ugly looking levels. The few times you do something that could be considered proper gameplay are broken, cheesy, and boring. And on top of all that, few of those gameplay moments have any relevance to the story. It's like they were stapled on as an afterthought, like they suddenly remembered they were supposed to be making a game. If any of the developers are listening to this, I'm sorry that my criticism is harsh. I don't like being negative on the internet because there's plenty of that to go around, obviously. But I'm being harsh because I want to wake you guys up to the fact that you're squandering a big opportunity here. You can delay the game and make it better. Make it something that can appeal to people who aren't already Christians. I'm not saying that I want them to make a game that can convert people. Like, you're not going to make me a Christian no matter how hard you try. But you can still put something beautiful into the game that appeals to everybody. And I have some ideas as to how things can be improved. The number one thing that this game fails at is what most forms of biblical media fail at: adaptation. To demonstrate what I mean, I will start with what I and many other people view to be a good adaptation of a biblical story, The Prince of Egypt. The reason why that movie is a good adaptation of the story of Moses is because it takes the right creative liberties. It stays true to the original story as far as notable events, like baby Moses being swept up the Nile River, Moses talking to God through the burning bush, the plagues on Egypt. But in between all of that are the wonderful musical numbers, the humor, the gorgeous animation, and most importantly, the drama, particularly between Moses and his stepbrother Ramses. None of that, obviously, was in the original biblical tale, but it was inserted in order to make the story work for the medium of film. Most importantly, those artificially inserted elements, I think, helped non-Christians and non-Jews see the beauty that the believers see in that original story. Unfortunately, The Prince of Egypt is one of those very few examples of religious media that adapt the stories properly. That and VeggieTales. Because the Larry Boy theme is my jam, man. Now, I don't know why Christians have a hard time adapting the biblical stories. Maybe it's because some of the more orthodox Christians believe that adapting the material and changing it would be like blasphemy? I don't know, maybe changing elements of Jesus' story to make a better movie would make Christians feel the same way fans of Back to the Future would feel if they heard there was going to be a remake. Worse, if that remake would be quote-unquote adapting the humor and themes for a modern audience. In regards to the I Am Jesus Christ game, I will give it credit. It does attempt to gamify the story of Jesus, which is a form of adaptation. Take one of Jesus' early miracles, for example, the healing of a sick child, a miracle which you can perform in the prologue. When you heal him, you actually go into the kid's bloodstream and attack the disease. This is the one part of the game where I think the developers had the right mindset. But even then, there are a number of problems. First, this part of the game is extremely easy. You walk to one part of the bloodstream, click a button, and boom, the kid is healed. Put aside the poor-looking textures and clunky control, nothing about this gameplay segment communicates to non-Christians why this is relevant, aside from the fact that this happened in the Bible and Christians believe it. If you wanted to make this moment appeal to non-Christians, if you wanted to make the emotional significance of this moment evident to non-Christians, I would suggest maybe adding some element of difficulty. Like, maybe have the disease attack Jesus in some way. And he doesn't have to die while attacking the disease. I know that would ruin the immersion. Instead, maybe have Jesus avoid the disease while it's trying to attack him. And if the disease lands an attack, then Jesus would just be slowed down while the disease runs away and builds its numbers back up again. Until the gamer figures out the right way to get rid of the disease, then the game can't progress. On top of this, maybe add some dialogue between Jesus, the boy, and the family. Some emotional moments that reward the gamer for contending with the difficulty of the bloodstream puzzle. Heck, maybe have the voice of Satan speak to Jesus when he's ridding the boy of the disease. Make him say things that attempt to make Jesus doubt God the Father. Like, what kind of God would do this to a young child? That would increase the drama. Yes, doing things like this would make things less accurate, but you would have a better game. And most importantly, it would get across the essence of who Christians believe Jesus to be. A man who suffered greatly to absolve the sins of mankind. By having some sort of struggle in fighting against the boy's sickness, and having the family react positively to your/Jesus's efforts, that would communicate the depth of Jesus's passion. Speaking of Satan, I'm going to continue on the subject of poor game design by talking about this game's portrayal of the Great Deceiver. If you're going to portray Satan's temptation of Jesus in the desert, which this game does, that has to be something hella epic, man. It's got to be like Goku versus Frieza levels of throwdown, you know what I mean? And honestly, I think the developers knew this to an extent, because they adapt the temptation of Christ into a combat scenario. Like, Jesus and Satan in this game are confirmed Super Saiyan, yo. They can shoot out and deflect energy blasts. Doesn't that sound awesome? Yes, it sounds awesome. But the actual fight is anything but. I said the word clunky before, but it's the most accurate word to describe the controls for this game and for this fight. When you deflect Satan's energy blasts, you have to time it just right, otherwise you get hit. Have you ever tried parrying in Dark Souls? Remember how hard it was to get that right the first time? That's what it's like deflecting Satan's attacks in this game. But it's not a matter of skill, like it is in Dark Souls. Here, it's just annoying. And Satan's voice actor doesn't help either. He sounds like me if I just lower the pitch of my voice in Audacity.
Well. Finally, we are meeting.
See what I mean? That just makes Satan seem like he's weak shit. And I know, Christians will be like, well, Satan is weak shit when I got the power of Jesus on my side. But come on. He's a villain. Make him villainous, not a parody. And once again, you gotta make Jesus struggle. Whether you do that through gameplay, visuals, or dialogue, you need to communicate to the audience the grueling temptation he is trying to overcome. You need to demonstrate how immense his task is at every point of his journey up until his crucifixion. That will demonstrate Jesus' passion. And the emotion that Jesus' passion compels, that is the universal element that I think Christian media needs to lock onto when adapting their stories. It's what will make this game appeal to gamers that would much rather play Doom, or something else associated with Satan that Christians don't like. And let me tell you, you're not going to convince people that Jesus suffered for our sins when he supposedly spent over a month fasting in the desert and is somehow still able to sprint. One last thing before I conclude. Developers, you need to stop having these Bible verses pop up randomly. They not only give me a heart attack each time they pop up, but they halt any positive momentum the game has when you're trying to complete your main quest. Nobody wants to be walking to their objective only to feel like they have to stand still to hear a verse from the Gospels. Plus, the Bible verses that are used have barely any relevance to what is happening in that moment. They're just quotes from Jesus that have no context. Now, if you want to find some way to put Bible verses in the game, maybe put them as cards that you can find throughout the level, like little Easter eggs. Maybe make a Steam achievement for finding all the Bible verses in each level, and maybe the entire game. That would be a great form of adaptation. I hope that what I said came across as somewhat constructive. I know I was harsh in the beginning, but that's not coming from a place of animus. I think there's potential for an interesting game centered on the life of Jesus, but I don't think the developers are using the right tools or methods or philosophies to get there. At the moment, the game looks, sounds, and plays like a really bad fan mod for The Elder Scrolls Oblivion. I do want to end on one positive note though. I do appreciate the fact that the game developers made Jesus yellow. As a Simpsons kin, I feel underrepresented in most forms of media, and representation matters, you know? I'm just joking. Alright, I'm back to work on other stuff. Peace be with you. Stay yellow. Bye.